My name is Caleb Hickman, and I'm a supervisory biologist for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. I'm a biologist, but I function more as an ecologist, and I work with a lot of different kinds of questions and data sources. Um, I collect data on different plants and animals, game and non-game species, protected species. I also work with people. So human dimensions is a topic that comes up a lot. A lot of my work is under what we call socio-ecological dynamics, so human and interactions with their ecosystem. But also we focus on what the tribe needs, and a lot of times it could be related to economic independence or cultural values. These issues of data sovereignty are coming up, where tribes want to be in control of their own data. And ESIP has a lot of people, practitioners, experts, people that work in a variety of different areas that we do too. And they have an array of expertise that we could pull from. And I'm finding that out as I'm at this conference. So I've met several people so far that I wish I would have met years ago. Some of the broader challenges that we deal with where ESIP could help deals with data independence. So how we process our own data, gaining some knowledge about what's possible is incredibly important. So when you see certain talks on a topic, or someone presents on a way to analyze data or work with different types of data, just knowing what is possible could give us an opportunity to understanding what kind of training we might need. And I think sourcing here at an ESIP meeting, the types of expertise and training that's could be useful for us would be valuable. I manage over 40 projects right now, and some of the projects are with outside researchers. Some of them we do internally. We work with federal, state, nonprofit groups. So a lot of our projects deal with restoration of certain species, habitat management for the benefit of species. We look at whether populations of organisms are increasing or decreasing. We look at communities and see how they're doing. And we also answer questions related to climate change. We work in adaptive management frameworks. So what that means is we want to know what's important to the people around us, but also the ecosystem. And we change what we are doing management-wise according to the needs. Outside researchers could gain a different perspective by reaching out to indigenous groups and by understanding a different philosophy, a different way of seeing your science. You can couple traditional knowledge if you want. There's ways to do that, but sometimes it's just changing your perspective. Tribes have been in particular places for thousands of years in many cases, and that thousands of years of experimentation that they've been through and oral traditions tied to that could be valuable for all kinds of current science and questions that we have. It could be in the form of fire management in California. What's the right way to go about it? It could be managing fish populations in a particular area. When do you sample? When do you harvest a plant? How do you process plants? Can you learn about medicines? There's a lot we can learn from tribes, but for me, I think the most important is the philosophy. Looking at people as part of the ecosystem rather than just harbingers of positive or negative change. A lot of tribes are trying to shift that, and ecologists are now starting to figure this out. We're discovering it, but tribes have known these relationships for thousands of years, and I think wherever you're at, a researcher could and should work with tribes near them to gain a different perspective. I didn't really go into what we call the Columbus effect, and it's also another term is doctrine of discovery. And I mentioned settler colonial perspectives. These are all terms that may go in one ear and out the other for a lot of people. But really what that means is changing these perspectives of how we see data, how we collect data as scientists, and how we work with groups of people, whether they're indigenous or populations of people that are disadvantaged, people with local knowledge. We are working with humans. We're working with real human beings that have needs, that have their own perspectives. And this is the problem with trying to define indigenous knowledge. A lot of times, even the terms themselves they can rub people the wrong way. Some people wouldn't like indigenous in there because it refers to us as just historical. It could be current. So, and what I mean by the current, so the philosophical differences that I keep bringing up. Rather than using indigenous knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge, sometimes we just call it science. Okay? Rather than separate them out, one has just been around a long time and maybe the way it's developed is slightly different. The other one, the Western science, we're going to call it, a lot of times is more quantitative. But I think where we can tease apart some differences, and if you're asking for a precise example, we can pick up knowledge that folks may have about plant medicine. There are examples of medicine, like most of our medicines we use today came from indigenous knowledge originally. People used something, this plant, for this particular treatment. I could go on and on about different examples of traditional knowledge, but one thing I want to pitch is it doesn't have to be historical. The philosophy of adapting, of understanding that you're part of the ecosystem. If you take the national park way of managing, they have preservationist management structure where we see humans as apart from that ecosystem in most cases. Tribes often don't do that. We consider ourselves as part of the ecosystem. And that's why we look around us and see it differently, and we see the impact differently. So sometimes it's just philosophy, but there are precise things we can gather.